Hi, this is Joey Busuttil, and welcome back to the EUDAIMONIA Connection podcast. What the last few months has been showing us how inspirational people from all different walks of life. We've spoken to an artist, we've spoken to an athlete, we've spoken to a coach, we've spoken to many different people who, I guess, see life differently to us. And so the way that we learn is by watching other people. Now, on today's show, we're going to speak to a guest from America that I've spoken to before in my other podcast, who is inspirational not only because of his energy and who he is, but because of his service to the community, the way that he views life and the way that he understands that it all comes from your attitude and what you do. So I'm very happy to welcome to the podcast, Terry Tucker. Hi, Terry.
Hey, Joey. How you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming back. So it's really exciting to speak to you and see you. So I know a lot of people would have heard your story from the last podcast. So let's start off with, I guess, the question I ask every guest, and that is, what's your definition of fulfillment? How do you know that you're fulfilled?
Great question. How do I know I'm fulfilled? I don't know. I'm not sure I've ever been fulfilled. I was asked a similar question on a podcast earlier, and my response was, I want to die learning. I want that last breath, that last thought to be something about learning and getting better and moving forward. I don't ever want to be at a point where I'm fulfilled. I don't need to do anything else. So I guess I don't think I've ever totally been fulfilled in my life.
Yeah.
Okay. Podcast over. Thanks. All right.
This is why it's so good to speak to different people, because it's interesting. Every single person has stumbled on that question, but everyone has given a different answer. And so your definition of fulfillment is it's always living. You're always seeking that every day. So in other words, I think you have been fulfilled, but the thing is that you're always seeking it every day rather than saying to yourself, I found it. Because I'm sure that when you would have met your wife and all that, you would have been fulfilled in those moments. Because if she hears this podcast, she's going to say, oh my God,
you're absolutely right. I'm not sleeping with the dog tonight. So.
So what do you think is the nicest thing that anyone's ever done for you?
I think so many people have done so many good things. I had a gentleman who I was a guest on his podcast, and he was a former police officer up in Canada. And unbeknownst to me, he had reached out to my former police department and my former friends and had them comment throughout the podcast, about what it was like to work with me and people I was in the academy with and stuff. I mean, you talk about watching a grown man brought to tears. I was crying like a baby. This was people that I'd worked with 20 years ago. So that was certainly touching. I think, again, I'll give a real simple example. The last time I had treatment for my cancer, I remember it was a Wednesday, and I was shaking and I was throwing up, and I had a fever and I felt terrible. And I'm in this dark room and I'm just crying. And a nurse just came in and put her arm around me. Didn't say a word, just put her arm around me. And so, those are the two things that come to my mind. That are just, it doesn't have to be anything big. It doesn't have to be anything over the top. It's just somebody doing some kindness, some service for you that you didn't expect and that you didn't ask for.
Yeah. And going back to the first example with the podcast, I'm going to guess, because I don't know you very well, but I know you enough to think, I'm going to guess that you were humbled by that.
Oh,
right. Tremendous. So please try and do this for me. So why do you think what do they see in you? And I know this is hard because you're humble and all that, but I think this is a really important thing for people that don't really value who they are, right? And they sort of think that they can't touch other people. But the reality is we all can. So sometimes we do things like I know you do things without thinking. You just do it because it's who you are. But I just want you to sort of dig deep a little bit and think about what they see. What do you think causes them to say and act that way towards you?
I think it was the same thing that when I was in the police academy, there were 50 of us, and we elected a president, a class president, and I didn't want the job. I didn't seek the job out. I didn't do anything, but but somebody nominated me, and then everybody voted for me. And when I asked them, like, why? I'm not, anything special. They're like, because you get along with everybody. You get along with the young recruits. You get along with the older recruits. You get along with the women. You get along with the men. You get along with the black recruits. You get along with the white recruits. You get along with the Asian. You get along with everybody. And that's what we wanted our president to be, somebody who could get along with everybody. So
yeah. And what do we call that? Come on, I want you to say the word. Because you're a born leader, my friend.
Well.
I knew you'd do that. I knew you'd be all humbled. But I think I felt that straight away when I met you. You've got, I don't know if it's just your energy or the way you look or something, but I would follow you anywhere. Like, you're a born leader. So you have that sort of that ideal thought process that people feel safe. So I'm guessing, that might be part of it too.
That might be. You're
yeah.
right.
So let's go back in time. You're 8 years old. And what advice would you like to give that 8-year-old now that you've lived your life? What advice do you think would help him along the way?
I would tell him not. Let me give him 2 pieces of advice. I would tell him that the barriers that he is going to face in life are going to be the barriers that he puts up in front of himself, and not to do that, to push through those barriers. And I would also tell him that, and I devoted an entire chapter in my book to this, that most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds. And I did that. I'm not going to say I did it a lot, but I certainly did that growing up, where I thought about doing something. Oh, that scares me. I don't think I want to do it. So those pieces of advice is what I would give. Not that at 8 years old I probably would understand it, but that's certainly the advice I'd give to somebody that was younger.
I think it's good advice. I mean, really, we don't give that advice to someone when they're 8 anyway. We should be telling them that all along. Do you think that, how did you change that? Do you think that your illness got you to change it, or did you change it before that?
I think I changed it in high school. I had...
Well, that's young.
Well, it is, but I also had 3 knee surgeries when I was in high school, and I was a very good high school basketball player, and I wanted to go to the next level. But having 3 knee surgeries, 2 of which were pre-arthroscopic surgery, so I have the long zipper scar on the outside of my knee. And I remember when I went back playing, my brain was putting all this negativity into my mind. My brain was like, you're probably a step slower, and coaches aren't going to want to recruit you to play in college. And I knew I had to flip that switch. It was like, no, wait a minute. I'm still playing at an elite level, and coaches are still calling me and sending me mail indicating they want to be, that they're interested. So no, that what you're saying, brain, is not true. It's wrong. I need to flip that switch to something more positive. And I learned that at, 15, 16 years old. Did I always do it? No.
Well, who taught you that? Because 15 is not a time that someone does what you just said. 15 is a time where there's all confusion and all that. So did you just organically just know that because you're a superhero, or did you get taught that?
Yes, you noticed the S on my chest, right? And my K. I think what it was after the second surgery, they took out 25 pieces of my bone that had chipped off. And my doctor told me, it's like, your basketball playing days are over and you may not walk normally again. And I'm like, wait a minute. The only success I've ever enjoyed in life up to this point was basketball. I am not willing to give that up just because some doctor told me. So I think it was, I'm going to do everything I can to fight back to play. And then once I did that, I'd overcome all this and I was back playing. Now my brain is like, hey, dummy, you're a step slower, or you're not going to, coaches aren't going to want to recruit you. It's like, no, I fought back through all this. That's not going to be my demise, listening to my brain put negative thoughts in my... So I guess it was, I just wasn't willing to give up what I'd come to love, what I'd come to be good at, and just because somebody else told me I couldn't do it.
Yeah, and that I like that, because we've been talking on the podcast about success, and really what we've come up with is that the definition of success is someone that's failed. and then gone on. And in your case, the surgery and the doctor could have easily have gone into your head and said, that's it, it's over. But instead, your mind, this is what the mindset does. Your mind worked on, hold on a second, no, and you changed it. And I think that's what the inspirational part is. So if you were to go back to that time of being young, what do you think would have been your very first childhood memory that inspired you? Like, you can go back as young as you want to be. Like, what do you remember a time that you felt really inspired that you wanted to be like someone else, or you felt like you were inspired by someone else? It could have been a parent or a coach or something. You're nodding because you remember, don't you?
I do, and your audience might think this is kind of weird, but there was a basketball player here in the United States who played for UCLA, the University of California at Los Angeles, and he's probably one of, if not the greatest college basketball player. And his name was Bill Walton, and I wanted to be like him, so much so that I had my own room when I was in 8th grade and up through high school. And I had double beds, and on one bed I slept in it, and on the other bed I would take Sports Illustrated's articles that he was in, and I would open them up and place them all over the bed. And every night before basketball practice, I would lay out all my practice stuff or my game stuff. It was the night before a game on those photographs of him.
Wow.
Like there was going to be some kind of magic that was, going to come into my shoes and my socks and my uniform. And that's how much I wanted to be like him. And then the next morning, I would load it all into my gym bag and off to school I would go.
So like you were channeling him into your psyche.
It was. I read everything I could about him. Like I said, I saved all these photographs. It was, I wanted to be like him.
Wow. And that's sort of like, do you think that stayed with you, or do you remember what the reason was? Was it just his performance, or do you think that he also had a way of life that you liked? Like, his attitude. I don't know if they get interviewed.
No, his attitude wasn't. He was kind of I solely wanted to be like him based on his play. But the things I had read about him was his coach was very strict and it had, haircut standards and everything like that. And I remember reading one time, and this is probably the best college basketball player in the United States at that time. And he went into his coach and he's like, Coach, I'm not going to cut my hair. I'm going to just leave it like this. And the coach was like, well, Bill, I totally respect your decision. I hope you enjoy the game watching it from the stands. So the coach didn't back down. The coach was like, yeah, I know you're the greatest player, but you know what? I'll play without you because I believe in these standards. And we talked about, you mentioned success earlier. This coach had the greatest definition of success I ever heard. And we talked about the mind. And here's what his definition was. Success is peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction in knowing that you did the best to become the best that you're capable of becoming. Doesn't say anything about winning or anything like that. It's success is peace of mind. That's a great definition. I've never heard a better one.
So did he cut his hair at all? No.
He did.
He did. Because I'm just trying to think what era we're talking about, and I'm thinking, okay, the long hair would have been probably not acceptable back then, wouldn't it?
The 1970s, yeah.
It would have been acceptable socially, but not on the basketball court.
Exactly, right, yeah. And he was kind of a hippie. He was kind of a somebody that would sleep on the beach and do all that kind of stuff. And his coach was very strict, very disciplined, and they won 7 national championships in a row. 7 years in a row, they were the best in college basketball. Today, you're lucky if you can win 2 in a row. There's just so much parity. They were just dominant, and I wanted to be him.
Yeah. Let's if you don't mind, let's stay in that time, that teenage time, because it sounds like you had a very strong attitude and a very strong mindset when you told yourself that you were going to fight what the doctor said. But if you go back to that time, do you recall any peer pressure that you felt that was coming your way, and do you recall how you dealt with it? Because teenage years are normally the time when you get pressured to, you're learning how to say yes and no in that time, aren't you? So do you recall anything from the 70s that you were sort of being pressured to do? I love the way that you're nodding your head because I know that you've got stories.
I do. When I was in 8th grade, so this was before, kind of maybe 7th grade. I was 6'5" tall when I was 13 years old. So that was 7th grade or so. I had a size 14 shoe, which was a long, skinny foot, and my ears looked like Dumbo from the Disney movie, the big elephant. My head had not caught up with my ears, and I got teased mercilessly because of my physical appearance. I was skinny. I used to say I used to have to run around in the shower to get wet. I mean, I was that skinny. But kids used to basically tease me constantly. But I took all that. I didn't own it. I used to always, I tell kids today, that teasing, that bullying only hurts if you take it in, if you internalize it, if you agree with it. I mean, I knew I had big ears, I knew I had big feet, but that didn't bother me. So I put all my effort into being a better basketball player. And, you think about it. I mean, eventually I grew up and, my head grew into my ears and I don't have those big ears anymore and things like that. But I wanted to be a great basketball player. So I just put all my effort into that and said, you know what, call me anything you want. I'm going to be a better basketball player. And, our 8th grade team won the state tournament. We even won a national tournament. And it was like, yeah.
But did they see you after? When you started winning, did they start seeing you different?
They did.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how when you offer them something, they decide to make you part of the team? But as much as you probably, you're talking very much as if it was inbuilt in you. Like I'm listening to you and I'm going, that, not a lot of people wouldn't have that. Again, I'm really curious to know how you learned to do all that, because kids get bullied and they just break down. But you were, look, I'm sure there's other kids out there that do what you do. So I think that there's an opportunity there for people to learn from your story. But, how did you learn to do that? Like, really, how did you learn to not take adversity on? Because, the surgery, the doctors, the coaches, the bullies, everything that you start telling us is all about adversity.
It is. And I don't know. I always kind of felt I was a loner. I liked being alone. And basketball is one of those sports that you can practice by yourself. It's not like baseball where you need somebody to pitch to you or hit to you, or football where you need to play basketball. All you need is a hoop and a ball, and you can do that. And that's what I did. When we were young, I'm going to say in the early 70s, when we moved into our home in Columbus, Ohio, myself, my brother, and my dad built a basketball court in our backyard. I mean, we dug the hole, we filled it with the rocks. The only thing we didn't do was have the asphalt put on top of it, and we put in the hoop. And I think today that hoop is probably still there. But I was very comfortable. I don't need to be with friends. I can be by myself. And being by myself let me fantasize, for lack of a better word, to think about, this is what I want. This is where I want to go. And it didn't matter what people do. You can't do that. Sure, I can. I just need to practice harder or more or whatever it was. So I kind of felt being a loner allowed me to develop that mindset that maybe being part of a group of friends where, I care what he says, or I didn't care what people said. I'll just go play basketball.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, again, most people seek the group or the attention. Well, you just learned that, that being on your own was not a bad thing.
No.
We
need to be comfortable with ourselves before we can offer anything to a group.
Yeah.
I probably took that to the extreme because I was comfortable with myself for a long time before.
I know, but look at the advantages it gave you. I mean, I still think that that's a big thing that people need to do now. And a lot of people that I see as a therapist are just experiencing that for the first time as an adult. So in some way you were lucky. I don't mean to make this a choice question, but I want you to go back to growing up again, and I want you to be, I guess, be honest. In regards to your parents, who do you think gave you the most things for you to take on as a man for life? Was it more your dad or was it more your mum? And what did they give you? I know that they both give you stuff, but
They did. I mean, my dad, my dad certainly gave me the sports part of my life, of being an athlete. I look back at my dad traveled. My dad was in real estate and actually worked in the regional office of McDonald's, the hamburger chain, and eventually was promoted to national real estate director here in the United States. But he was gone a lot. And my mother, I mean, there were three boys, and we were all playing sports. And so it was a matter of, she was the carpool person, the person who stayed up late and washed our uniforms, the person that had a meal ready for us when we got home from school. She did, in terms of giving, my mother gave much more than my father gave. But my father gave me something that I wanted. My mother gave me something that I needed.
Yeah. God, you got good answers. They're very correct, aren't they? Like, no one's going to get upset with that answer. So let's jump to now then. So how do you feel you inspire your children? Like, from the time that you were inspired by your parents, your dad gave you something you wanted, your mum gave you something you needed. Have you, how sometimes that saying you end up becoming your parents? Like, what do you feel you've taken from your life now and that you're giving to your, you've got a daughter, haven't you? Two or one daughter? Yeah. And so, like, what do you give to her that you feel would inspire her?
I think the other thing that my parents collectively gave to us was the importance of family. I talk, especially on my cancer journey, one of the things that's gotten me through are the three F's: faith, family, and friends. And family was incredibly important. We supported each other. We went to each other's games. Sometimes my parents had to do what I call divide and conquer. Okay, Terry's got a game over here. Mom will go to that game, and Larry and Brian have a game over here. Dad will go to that game. And that was incredibly important. And my parents were, academics are important. You're going to have at least a C average in order to play. You don't get that, you don't study, you're not playing. I don't care how good you are. So when it came time for me to parent, and again, I sort of make fun of this, but I had no sisters. So when, the OBGYN asked us if we wanted to know what the sex of our child was, like, well, yeah, well, you better buy pink. I was like, no. You need to keep it in there until it's done. I have no idea what to do with the girl. And we raised a tomboy, but we also raised somebody who's very moral, very spiritual, religious, very smart and sure of herself. But I remember even when I was an adult, I was 25 years old. My youngest brother was in high school. My dad was sick. He was dying of cancer. And I had a job, but I was living at home helping my mom care for my dad and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. And I remember one night I said to my dad, you know what? I know Brian's got a game, but I'm not going to the game night. I'm going to go work out. I haven't worked out in a few days. I need to do this. My dad looked at me like, no, you're not. I'm sorry. I'm 25 years old. I have my own job. What excuse me? I'm going to go work out. No, you're not. You're going to your brother's game. Guess what I ended up doing? I ended up going to my brother's game because that's what my parents taught us, the importance of family, the importance of supporting each other. And that's what I think my wife and I have done with our daughter. There have been times where our daughter has failed. And the first thing that's come into my mind has been, good. Let's see how this works. Let's see what she learns. I don't want to be the helicopter parent that swoops in. I mean, she was being bullied when she was in middle school. And she would tell me about it. And I'm like, you want me to get involved? No, Dad, I got it. I'll take care of it. And it's like, okay, fine. I'm not going to report it to the school. You've got this. You take care of it. Let's see how that works. Yeah. When she was recruited to play basketball, she ended up going to the United States Air Force Academy here to play basketball. Great academic school, Division I top basketball. And I told her, I said, okay, there are other coaches that wanted you to play for them. Now that you've made your decision, you need to call them and tell them of your decision. She's like, no, I'll just send them a text. I'm like, oh, no, you won't. This has been about developing relationships. I said, you're not going to end this in a text. You're going to call them. And she was we had to role play that. And she had some coaches from lesser schools academically and from an athletic point of view who got mad at her and yelled at her. And I'm like, no, good. This is a good lesson to learn at an early age. It's like, that coach yelled at me and she would be crying. I'm like, okay, Did you
Yeah,
think it made the right decision for you? Yeah. So what do you care what that coach thinks?
that's good.
He doesn't have your best interest in mind. All he cares about is his program. He doesn't have your best interest in mind. Do you really want to play for somebody like that?
Yeah. So, do you think? I know the answer is going to be yes, but I'm curious to know, what do you think
Yes.
what has she taught you? Because I mean, you're giving her a lot of amazing insight. So you know how sometimes kids surprise us and you end up going, oh. So have you had one of those moments yet?
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember when I was a policeman, we had bought a new car, and I, I I was working nights, and I had to go to court during the day. I was exhausted, and I remember that we were sitting in the car in the garage, and she was in the passenger seat, and I don't know, she was young. I don't know how old, maybe 7 or 8 or something like that. And she thinks she's all that because, as a kid, you're sitting in the booster seat in the back. So now I'm in the front. And I gave her the keys, and she dropped them down between the seats.
Mm.
And I exploded. I exploded on her. And that was the first time I realized just how much she looked up to me, just how much everything I did, she was like a sponge.
Mm.
Same thing with my wife. Everything my wife did, she was like a sponge, taking that in. And that's when I realized, no, there's a John Wooden, going back to the saying about success. He had another great saying, and it was this: a careful person I want to be, a little person follows me. I dare not go astray for fear they may go the same way. And as soon as I blew up, I knew I was wrong.
Did she cry? Did she cry or anything? Or
Oh, she cried. Absolutely. I'm like, get those keys, because my hands were too big to get down in there. And the interesting thing is, and I still remember this. She's digging down on the side, between the console and the seat, and she's talking to herself. She's like, "Come on, Mikaela, you can." Her name's Mikaela. You can do this. Come on, Mikaela, you can get these keys. You can get. So she's talking. She's giving self-talk,
wow.
positive self-talk to herself that she can do this.
Hmm.
So I mean, I guess there was some positive out of it, but to this day, I still regret doing that. It was like not one of my better moments as a parent.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, last question. I could talk to you for hours, but what do you think? And you could look at this from a retrospective, or you can look at it from a futuristic. What do you think is worth waiting for? Because you know how I guess we live in a society now where everything's quick and people move on and they get bored easily. But I think when we hear about your basketball story, you were very persistent. So, what do you think is worth waiting for? Or has it happened to you, or are you still waiting for something to come that you're looking forward to?
I'm. Let me sort of answer this in two parts, if I may. So, what do I think is worth waiting for now? I think for anybody out there, two things. One, your purpose. I think you should, continue to strive to find the reason you were put on this planet, for whatever that purpose is, and not stop until you figure that out, until you find that. So that's the first thing I'd say. And the second thing I would say is worth waiting for is unconditional love. I think that's very important. Now, for me, this is going to sound really corny, and I don't want to turn off your listeners, but I'm almost excited to see what's on the other side of this life. I know I'm coming to the end of my life with my cancer journey, and that doesn't scare me because I think I found and lived my purpose. So I'm certainly interested. I'm almost to the point of being excited to see what's on the other side of this life. So I think
we need to organize a way to get in touch with you. Because I think that my mum's passed away from cancer, and it's coming up to 6 months, and it's so surreal when something happened last night, which I hope you don't mind me sharing. So I went into my room, and imagine there's a bench in my room and it's empty, right? I go to the bathroom and I come back and there's a feather sitting on the bench, and my mum's symbol was a feather. Like she would say to us, "Whenever I'm going to be with you, you'll see a feather." And I'm thinking, I go, yeah, okay. But when you walk out of a room and then you walk in and there's a feather and there's no other reason why that feather should be there, it is, you get these goosebumpy feelings going, oh my God, I guess we don't know the real answer, but you just sort of go, oh. And I mean, the funniest part was another time I opened my sock drawer and there was 7 feathers in there. You know, you can imagine 1 is good, 2,
Right.
but when you get to 7, you think, okay, is someone playing a joke on me? Is there like who's
Did
around?
Mom have a party here? You know, what was going
Yeah.
on, Mom? Are you partying?
So do you have an essence of what you think might be there?
I do. I mean, I feel that we were created in love by a God who knew all the dumb, stupid, crazy, idiotic, sinful things we were going to do in life, and yet still loved us enough to put us on this earth to try to make a difference in his world, for lack of a better pronoun, his world, whatever you believe that entity to be. So what I think, I mean, we're not going to take our power, our prestige, our money, our influence. That's not going with us. But I think the love we have in our heart does go with us wherever we go after we're done here.
Mm. Terry, you're such an inspiration. I think you should write another book.
Well, I'm kind of working on that, you know.
Yeah.
And I think the last podcast you and I talked about that. You know, my first book was about success. And I think I want my second book to be about something more important than success, and that's significance.
Yeah.
You know, I think you can be both. I think you can be successful and significant, but success is what we do for ourselves. Significance is what we do for other people. That service component.
Yeah. And if anyone wants to get Terry's book, there's the link down below because it's a good read, and I think it's important to read about inspirational people rather than, you know, I know it's good to read about people that are famous, like the real famous people, but I think it's important to read stories of people that just live life and are humble, and I think we learn a lot from those people. So, Mr. Terry Tucker, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you have a great evening there. Have a great evening, and I'm going to keep in touch with you, my friend.
I hope you do, Joey. I mean, you talk about energy for me. You have that same kind of energy. You have that same kind of.
That's because of you. I woke up. It's early morning here, and I just feel like I've had 5 coffees because of you.
Good. There you go. I'm a substitute for caffeine. I like that.
Yeah. So thank you, and we'll catch up with you soon. Okay, Terry?
Thank you. You take care of yourself.
You've been listening to the EUDAIMONIA Connection podcast. This is Joey Busuttil. So don't forget, podcasts are out on Wednesday, and hit the like button and subscribe so you can get updates for the next podcast interview. So we interview inspirational people every week to find fulfillment. Till next time, everyone. See you later.